All right. Hello. Thanks so much for joining me for Mondays with Mike, Studio Edition. Here we are in our beautiful Fox 26 studios. There's the green wall. A little bit of a serious topic today, though, because I want to talk about Hurricane Ian. And, obviously it's, going to go down in history as one of the worst storms ever as far as damage and even loss of life, at least in modern times. But I want to talk about some of the things that kind of went wrong. We did have the numbers are still coming in on how many lives were lost, but it's a lot and way too many, way more than we should have at this day and age when we have so much technology, such great computer modeling and such great satellite and radar imagery that, you can see a storm forming. It's not like 100 years ago where you got completely caught off guard by a storm. Now we see it coming for very far in advance. I'm wondering if maybe some of that may have affected some of the planning that was taking place. Maybe the forecast was too specific. So we're going to talk about that here on Mondays with Mike. Now, I actually have my computer here set up to connect to our weather computer. And so I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here and show you a couple of things that we have going on the weather computer. I want to talk about a couple of interesting things too, including reverse storm surge, along with, some before and after and some things that may have been done better to help protect life and property. So I'm going to go ahead and share video here. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let me go ahead and share screen, and there we go, max 3 and share. So, all right, so now we're on our weather computer here, and what I want to show you is a couple of things. So let's talk about, first of all, was this a good forecast or a bad forecast? Well, think about this. This was the outlook from the, hold on, I'm trying to get my mouse here to make sure that this makes sense. Okay, I have two mice going at the same time here, which is a little weird. Okay, so this is the forecast from the National Hurricane Center that was issued on, get this. So this was issued on Saturday, September the 24th. Now keep in mind the storm hit on September the 28th. Okay. So this is a very, very far in advance. In fact, let me go ahead and back it up to the very beginning. So this is, this is the very first. You want to talk about a perfect forecast? Look, this is kind of the point of of this whole Mondays with Mike is about this was an unbelievably good forecast. Okay. Which makes me that much more disappointed, that much sadder and more sort of upset and angry about it, that there was such a large loss of life. Now look at the screen right now. This was the very first advisory that was issued when the storm was in its infancy. In fact, it was not even Ian yet. This is Tropical Depression number 9. It was located way over to the south of Puerto Rico. And this was the very first forecast that was issued by the National Hurricane Center. Now, I want you to look and see where the cone is pointed, and I want you to see that last H. That is exactly where the storm hit. This was an absolute pinpoint perfect forecast as far as the location, 5 days in advance. Look, this was the National Hurricane Center forecast that was issued on Friday, the 23rd. The storm hit on the 28th. Okay, so this was a full 5 days in advance, 5-day forecast. Absolutely perfectly pegged where the storm was going to be. That's mind-boggling, isn't it? Now, of course, the Hurricane Center used a lot of computer models to come up with this forecast. And really, it was the European model and the GFS model and what we call their ensembles that did an unbelievably good job at forecasting the location of the storm. Now, that being said, there were a couple of things that were problematic with the storm. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into motion. What I'm showing you here is the progression of the graphical forecasts. This is where the trouble begins. Okay. This is Saturday, September the 24th, the evening of Saturday, September the 24th. Now, the storm hit on Wednesday, the 28th. Okay, so this is now Saturday night, the 24th. And you'll notice here, let me back this up. Okay, at the very beginning of the forecast, it was pointed directly where it ended up hitting, Southwest Florida. In fact, as of the advisory on that previous Friday, they were showing a major hurricane strike exactly where it hit Fort Myers. Unbelievable. However, as I put this ahead in time, okay, you're going to see where things started to go awry a little bit. Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect. Now some of the models started to shift a little farther to the west. Okay, so now you're looking at, I remember at this point, the GFS model was slowing the storm down and was predicting a movement closer to the west. So you went from having a perfect forecast to now a fairly imperfect forecast. And this was Sunday, the 25th. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is now 3 days prior to the storm making landfall. You now have a forecast that isn't so terrific. In fact, at this point, 3 days out, Fort Myers and Naples and Punta Gorda and Cape Coral, Florida, some of the hardest hit locations were not included in the cone of uncertainty. Now, the cone of uncertainty includes historical errors over the last 5 years, average errors. And so most of the time, the center of the storm is going to end up in that cone, but there is about 1/3 of the time that it won't end up in the cone. And if you average it out, it means approximately 1/6 of the time, it'll end up to the right side and 1/6 of the time to the left side of the storm. So here we are 3 days out and the forecast is not that terrific anymore. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put this in motion a little bit more. At this point, so this is now late night Sunday. Remember, it hit Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday midday. So late night Sunday, now you have a tropical storm watch that's been issued for the Southwest Florida coastline. Now, tropical storm watch means that tropical storm conditions are possible within the next 48 hours. So at this point, you have folks there on the southwest coast of Florida that are looking at tropical storm conditions, but they're also looking at this cone and seeing, well, we're not in the cone. And remember, the center of the cone, all of the attention was on Tampa, right? Now, at this point in my head, I'm thinking Hurricane Charlie, Hurricane Charlie, Hurricane Charlie. 2004, it was the same situation where you had a hurricane that was pointed at Tampa. The national media, your CNNs, your Fox Newses, your NBCs, your ABCs, everybody was sending their crews to Tampa, and it ended up taking a jog towards Southwest Florida, and they had widespread destruction there in the Punta Gorda, Florida, Port Charlotte area. So this is now getting a little bit closer to the storm. Now we're going to take a look at a shift, very, very gradual shift. At this point, this is Monday, okay? This is less than 48 hours before landfall. And at this point, hurricane warnings are in effect for Tampa, and they're in effect for Sarasota. We have tropical storm warnings that are in effect for Southwest Florida. Now, keep in mind, less than 48 hours later, they got hit by a 150 mile per hour monster category 4. Less than 48 hours beforehand, they were under a tropical storm warning. Now, people are not typically going to evacuate for tropical storm warnings, right? Here's where the fail really starts to come into place. And this is nothing against the National Hurricane Center. This is nothing against local emergency managers. I'm just telling you, this is what it is what it is. Okay. So we'll go ahead and fast forward in motion here. And I hope I'm not boring you, but this is real important stuff. Real important stuff. So now we're going to go ahead and fast forward to when the first warning was issued. And this is, okay, I'm getting a poor network connection for some reason. Come on. The first warning is issued here on not until 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Can you believe that? So the first time that Southwest Florida was included in a hurricane warning was, now hold on, I'm peeking around the side of the camera here, was 5 p.m. This is a mind-boggling because I didn't even realize this. The hurricane warning, the tropical storm warning, was upgraded to a hurricane warning 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Now remember, the storm hit midday Wednesday. So a lot of people are angry, disappointed, as they should be, that the evacuations really were not called for until Tuesday morning. And I'll show you that here in a minute. But even the National Hurricane Center warnings, the hurricane warning did not go up for Fort Myers until Tuesday night, the day before landfall, which is just unbelievable when you think about it. Yikes. See, here we go. This is, you know, a look back at through the afternoon. This is 5 a.m. the day it was going to make landfall. And sure enough, Southwest Florida is not under a warning. So anyway, you know, not to beat a dead horse here, but the bottom line is it is true that the forecast was flubbed. You know, I mean, now, as always, you go back and you think about what could have been done differently. But in this case, I think this is going to be talked about for many years by the National Weather Service, by the local, by the National Weather Service locally, and by the National Hurricane Center of, you know, did we flub this one? Did we wait too long to issue hurricane warnings? And from state emergency managers and elected leaders, did they wait too long to ask for evacuations? Now, I wasn't there. I was here, okay? And so what occurred to me was I asked myself the question, okay, sometimes, in fact, very often, what you see on national media is not what you see locally, okay? And by that, what I mean is, very often, and I remember this with Hurricane Charlie in 2004, a lot of the national media sent their crews, spent a lot of money, traveled, sent their crews, their reporters, everybody to Tampa. And so all of the national media attention was on Tampa, and then the storm ended up hitting Fort Myers, Naples, Punta Gorda. But what I thought at the time, what I knew at the time, was that the local media in those areas, not talking about CNN, but I mean the local television stations there, were no doubt warning everybody about the danger to Fort Myers and Naples, even though the national media, if you were watching from Houston, you might not have gotten that impression. So I wanted to take you here. This is our Fox station in Fort Myers, and I wanted to look back at their Facebook page and say, okay, what were they posting? So this is 6 days ago. And so this was the day before, this was the morning before landfall. Okay. So this was 4:30 a.m. on Tuesday. Remember, it hit midday Wednesday. So this is 4:30 a.m. Tuesday, and they issued a cone saying that the center of circulation, or saying, let's see, well, I'll read you what they wrote. Tracking the tropics, the center of the latest forecast cone, so that's mistake number 1, or mistake number 20. The center of the latest forecast cone shows Hurricane Ian is set to make landfall in the Tampa area as a Category 3 hurricane. Shout out to Jason Natoli. Jason Natoli. I don't know Jason Natoli, but he wrote, and look at your screen, he wrote, awfully bold statement that it's going to make landfall in Tampa area. Latest models have shifted south and east. So even this viewer, who I don't know if he's a meteorologist or not, he probably isn't. He didn't say he was, but even he recognized the problem with showing a line down the middle of a cone and saying with certainty, this is where the storm is going 2 days before landfall. Actually, about a day before landfall, day and a half. So that's a mistake. And I'm not blaming the people at the Fox station in Fort Myers at all, but I'm just saying that's the trap that that you can fall into as a forecaster and as a news organization. There's tunnel vision, and you just look at that cone and listen. I have decided, as the chief here, when we're under a threat, I'm not necessarily saying we're going to remove it for everywhere, but when a serious storm is headed our way, we're going to drop that center line. It's got to be done. The center line has to be dropped. The icons that are shown there need to be much larger. I think people, when you show a line and when you show little hurricane icons like are present there in the picture that you see on your screen, is extremely misleading. So if you were to look at that, without reading too much, if you were to look at that and you lived in Fort Myers or Naples, you would say, oh, it's going to Tampa, right? Because that doesn't necessarily paint the picture of, oh my gosh, I'm actually at a legitimate major risk, right? It really doesn't. And again, I'm not blaming them. I mean, this happens. Hindsight is 2020, right? Hindsight is 2020. And I'm not blaming anybody here. I wanted to zoom up here to later on that morning. So this is their morning news at Fox 4 in Fort Myers, the day before landfall. And they are saying evacuation orders are in effect for Zone A and Zone B in Lee County. So that's the Fort Myers area. So at this point, and this I think was about 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock. Let's see. I'm hovering my mouse over there, over the time here, and it'll tell you because it says 6 days ago. Okay, so this is 6:23 a.m. on Tuesday, approximately 30 hours before landfall. And these are now evacuation orders that are being issued. Now, remember, up until now, people expected this thing to quote unquote hit Tampa, but I'm not sure how much of the danger was highlighted, how much of it was, how urgent everything was made to feel for the people of the Fort Myers area. Like I said, I wasn't there. I wasn't watching all the television stations. All I can do is go back for you and look back at the Hurricane Center, look back at the Weather Service, look back at the local media and see what they were saying. And I am seeing a confirmation from my point of view of what a lot of people are complaining about, which was that they felt that they were caught off guard. I'll click on this, this is a article from NPR that says Florida officials face questions over the late evacuation order in Lee County. So again, just to let you know, okay, now this is as of this writing, at least 42 people are dead in Lee County, Florida. That number, I think, has gone up a lot. I mean, the last I saw, the number's over 70. At least 42 people are dead in Lee County, one of the hardest hit by Hurricane Ian, where rescue and recovery efforts are still ongoing. Local officials are now facing questions about why they didn't urge people in the path of the destructive Category 4 hurricane to evacuate sooner. Last Sunday, 3 days before the storm landed on the peninsula, the National Hurricane Center predicted that Ian could bring a storm surge of 4 to 7 feet. Now, you remember, that was the graphic I showed you, the one that was the very first one that came out when it was Tropical Depression number 9. It was pointed directly at Southwest Florida. And so 5 days ahead of time, the National Hurricane Center was warning that there could be a significant storm surge in Southwest Florida. That was before that forecast was shifted to the west. According to the county's emergency management plan from 2018, even a 10% chance of a 6-foot storm surge is enough to prompt the evacuation of Zone A. That includes barrier islands, like this is like Sanibel Island, those areas, barrier islands. I think there's Captiva Island there also. The shoreline and inland areas along the Caloosahatchee River. Officials didn't order a mandatory evacuation at that time, even as neighboring Charlotte County required residents to go on Monday. So let that sink in. You have two adjacent counties. You have Charlotte County, which has Port Charlotte. You have Lee County, which has Fort Myers. According to NPR, Charlotte County asked for the evacuation on Monday. That's more than 48 hours ahead of the storm. Lee County waited until Tuesday morning. By then, everybody's kind of scrambling, right? They're confused. All right. Authorities first ordered mandatory evacuation of Zone A, parts of Zone B, ultimately expanding it to include all of Zone B and C. That was the same day that the National Hurricane Center raised the storm surge prediction for Lee County to 5 to 10 feet. By Wednesday afternoon, Ian had made landfall and it was all over. I mean, not all over, but I mean, it's forget about evacuation. By then, it's too late. So, sorry, my battery's going out here. So, man, hindsight is 2020. Okay. Yes, hindsight is 2020. But one can look back at this situation and just wonder what they were thinking. I'm telling you, anybody who's been around, if you've been around, if you have gray hair, you remember Hurricane Charlie. I'm going to pull it up for you right now, okay? Because it just makes me so upset. It really does. Let me go ahead and share. I'm going to share the screen again. And let me pull up my internet here because and I haven't even looked at this, but I'm going to show you. Okay, share. I'm going to go ahead. Okay, it says my network connection is unstable. I don't know why. I'm going to go to Hurricane Charlie. Okay, Hurricane Charlie. Hit enter. And we will see. Come on now. Let's go to the good old Wikipedia. Okay. And there we go. Giant storm, Hurricane Charlie, 150 miles per hour. And let me see if I could show you the path. So here we go. I mean, you want to talk about like a complete redo. This thing took almost the exact same path. You are not looking at a path of Ian right now. You're looking at a path of Hurricane Charlie 18 years ago. It did the exact same thing. It hit the exact same part of Florida. And the setup was precisely the same. The center of the cone was pointed at Tampa. It made a sort of last day jog to the east and ended up slamming people who weren't prepared. And it's like history repeated itself. You wonder how could this happen again? And it shouldn't happen again. And it's not going to happen here. As people who live along the coast and the Gulf Coast, all of us here, and let me specify, you run from water and hide from wind. So what that means is you evacuate for storm surge and you take shelter from wind. Now, from what we're seeing here preliminarily, the vast majority of people who died from storm surge there in Southwest Florida. There were some other fatalities elsewhere from flooding and so forth, but the vast, vast majority of people died in the storm surge. The two most important things you could do to live in a hurricane, to survive a hurricane, is number one, you evacuate the coastline or any area prone to storm surge. That's number one. And number two, you do not drive in floodwater. If you avoid those two things, you avoid almost all fatalities from hurricanes. That's the truth. So what are my opinions on what should be done differently next time? What could have been done differently this time? Okay, first of all, people naturally are very hesitant to evacuate. But when the governor, the mayor, the city council, the county government, when they come on and order a mandatory evacuation, typically people will listen and they will leave. A lot of times people don't want to leave because they're afraid their house is going to get robbed, burglarized, and I get that. And there should be maybe some plans put in place for extra security so that doesn't happen somehow. That's not my area of expertise, but I'll tell you that people are hesitant to evacuate until they're told to do so. That's why people in positions of power have to bite the bullet. They have to make that decision earlier and live with the consequences of the storm not hitting. Okay. Because, it's kind of like your parents taught you, right? Better safe than sorry. If you wait until the last minute, which they kind of did in Lee County, where you're ordering an evacuation 24 hours before a storm surge moves in, 30 hours before 100-mile-per-hour winds. Okay. That's not a lot of time for people to make the decision to evacuate. And, it didn't work out, obviously. So my takeaway from this is we need to eliminate the line from the center of the cone. The cone is there because there is uncertainty in the forecast. That's why the cone's there. And to put a line in the middle of it defeats the whole purpose of the cone. And time and time and time again, everybody focuses on that black line in the middle of the cone, which we're not going to use anymore. Not for local hurricanes. I can't promise that we're not going to use it for some hurricane out in the Atlantic or whatever, but if there's a hurricane that's threatening the Houston area, we're not doing a line at Fox 26. It's too dangerous. And secondly, the line down the middle does not convey the idea of how huge a hurricane is. Everybody focuses on this little dot. Well, the storm surge can reach out for hundreds of miles. Flooding can reach out hundreds of miles. So everybody needs to really understand the hazards. And I think that overall, and I'm not casting blame on any particular person, but I'm talking about from broadcasters to the Weather Service, to the Hurricane Center, to the governor, to everybody. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm saying the whole deal. Everybody needs to stop focusing in on that line, and the national media needs to stop doing it too, because everybody wants to have the big story. And so they send their whole team to Tampa, and it's like, I saw it coming from a mile away. So anyway, hopefully our hurricane season is really winding down here in Texas. It's extremely rare for us to get any sort of serious threat once we get past mid-October. I mean, I'm recording this on October 3rd, so we're not out of the woods yet, but once we get past around the 15th, 17th-ish, it's usually over with by then. Traditionally, like in recorded history, we've only had one hurricane that hit. The latest hurricane was October the 15th. So we've never had anything hit substantially after that. So anyway, I didn't mean to come off as angry today. I think I'm just like, look at all the people who died. And there could have been at least, sure, there's always going to be some people who refuse to leave. Absolutely. But I think if decisions had been made earlier, if the darn cone had been shown properly, if the storm surge threat would have been emphasized more by emergency managers, and I'm not faulting any local broadcasters there because I don't really know what they showed, and I can't go back and watch their whole 48 hours of coverage. They might have done a great job. I don't know. But people aren't really going to listen until the government tells them they have to leave. So there need to be a lot of things cleaned up. We shouldn't have fatalities with the technology we have. We should not have fatalities like that. So that'll do it for this week's Mondays with Mike. It is a serious one. We just lost a lot of people. That was avoidable. So that'll do it for this week's Mondays with Mike. You live, you learn, you take each disaster and you try to learn from it. And so that's something that we are definitely going to take into account in all of our future coverage, at least here at the station, that we're going to look at all previous storms, whether it's Harvey or Ike or now Ian, and take the lessons learned from it so that we can keep you, our viewers, safe. So thank you so much for tuning in, and sorry I rambled on a little bit. That'll do it for this week's Mondays with Mike. See you next week.